looking at their business model, it's all about price and volume. And, as you just talked about in the US and in some other advanced economies, you could argue that they are approaching saturation and being forced to look elsewhere for new subscribers. If they do end up struggling on the volume side of things, that obviously puts a lot more pressure on price. Is there a threshold where they're likely to see resistance on pricing?
It's tough to forecast how consumers are going to think about pricing into the future. At the moment, pricing, and based on the conversations that we're having at ThirdBridge with our experts, the pricing environment in streaming is relatively benign. There are lots of different competing platforms, but they all have relatively low price positions. So when people think about competition in the context of Netflix, they often talk about Disney versus Netflix as if it's a zero-sum game. I think it's important to bear in mind that the growth for Disney doesn't necessarily constrain growth for Netflix. Indeed, you didn't really see that in 2020, while Disney Plus grew incredibly strongly in terms of volumes. So did Netflix. Netflix enjoyed a record year. And I think there's also an element of a tremendous amount of just structural growth within streaming more broadly. So while this pandemic boom may be cooling somewhat for these businesses, there still represents a significant amount of screen share within the linear broadcast space that's moving over to on demand, which will benefit all the players in the space. It just so happens that Netflix is the biggest beneficiary of that structural shift going forwards.
Dan, do you guys have a view on how many subscription streaming services people are likely to want to hold as we come out of these COVID lockdowns?
Very hard to say, and it'll vary by region and by consumer preference. But the conversations that we're having with experts suggest people are very happy to subscribe to both Disney and to Netflix as an example. And actually, the content suite there is quite complementary rather than competitive. And I think you've seen that in some of the content for Disney that skews more towards children and plays very well with families, while Netflix has this content leadership position in original programming and scripted drama.